media says are problematic, because those games don't all call for harmful acts. Like, Sarkeesian criticizes the use of prostitution in games, but as Thunderfoot points out, prostitution is not inherently any more immoral than is any other labor exchange. We're all selling our bodies in one way or another, so why are we gunning after sex work here?
You see, the core here is Anita wants women to be ashamed of selling sex or sexual imagery. And I think that if they want to make an informed decision to sell sex or sexual imagery, then that's fine.
Or Sarkeesian criticizes the use of damsels in video games. But as the Amazing Atheist points out in his cameo in this video, when women are damsels in these games, it's usually posed as a negative thing, something that the protagonist must put an end to.
I could perhaps understand that attitude if the games Anita was attacking were advocating such a thing, but these acts are almost universally committed by the bad guys, who the hero must then defeat.
Now, honestly, I think this is a really lackluster argument. It just doesn't make sense to reserve our judgments of media to only those things that the work is actively calling for. We also have to look at subtext and coding, and the way that the work creates meaning in the wider worlds of art and culture. And keeping with our Nazi propaganda theme, which I guess we have here, let's use this boy as an example. Now, if we were all living in some kind of post-bigotry utopia that never had any concept of anti-Semitism, it's hard to see why this image would be a problem. There's nothing wrong with having a greedy character in your media, so why would it be wrong here? And yes, this guy is recognizably
incredibly long?
grotesque rendering of various Jewish characteristics,
Maybe.
but why is that a problem? Isn't it okay to draw Jewish people included,
Tell me when you hear
in a
this.
grotesque manner? And besides,
it froze.
what harm is this image advocating? He's just a boy, an innocent boy minding his own business, hunting for turnips. But no, this image obviously sucks, because in the society it was used in, it conveyed terrible ideas. It served to implicitly justify racial hierarchy, and to normalize the idea that Jewish people were subhuman. It is because we recognize that this piece of art is a reflection of the culture that made it, and because the opinions expressed by it are still present in modern society, that we say this art is harmful. It's not all about what happens on the surface level.
It is
And
Alienware
because
of some kind.
when
I'd have to look it up.
we're
It's been a
presented
little while
with
since I bought
these
it.
games,
I just
we'll
bought something
sometimes
that I knew would be good,
have to answer complicated questions.
because I'm not
For
really a
instance,
techie guy.
What perspective does this game have on prostitution?
Oh, hello, honey. Looking for a good time? I can give you a good deal.
It's an Alienware gaming PC, so probably.
Too bad you have friends around. I'm not into groupthink. Come around next time. I might even give you a freebie to make up for it.
Does it make us reconsider our puritanical, sex-negative biases? Give us
Where would I
empathy for the
find
people
that
who work
info?
these jobs? Or does it sort of thoughtlessly glorify a series of bad things? Portray sex trafficking and tourism as fun and goofy and alluring? Play into a historical tendency to treat Asian people as exotic and subservient? I haven't played whatever game I'm pulling a clip from here. I can't answer this question, and the answer might be very complex.
It has pretty lights on it.
But when Anita Sarkeesian says that the second answer is more true, and gives evidence for the idea that that's a common theme in video games, responding with the statement, "But in a vacuum, prostitution is perfectly fine," is not a real argument. It doesn't actually deal with the work at hand or the society that made it. All it's really saying is, I don't see anything wrong with this drawing. I can't see what you're finding a problem with here. And it's like, cool, you know? Got him, dude. Alright, one last super quick argument. Thunderfoot sometimes says
And I
that
can color
games
coordinate
can't be
lights.
sexist or harmful because they're sold under capitalism.
Yeah, I have no
and
idea where to look to
people buy
find.
them.
Notice how the
information
camera
about here at
moves,
this point.
how it focuses on and zooms in on specific body parts to highlight the
Pause the BreadTube radio. Just a minute. Let's see. Properties of C. It's probably not there. Control panel? Maybe there's something in there. Putting on movies and cuddling is of great importance. That's another thing nerds don't understand all that well. DVDs and cuddling. Very important. Well, just cuddling in general.
Far too much useless garbage. Going to have to dump some of this.
Were there pretty lights and comfy cuddles in Salem? That's a lot of fairy lights. And he kept them this whole time. Well, rock and roll never forgets.
Yes.
Something you want?
How can I help?
What game?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it Borderlands? Final Fantasy 11? Final Fantasy 7? Ah. Is it? I know nothing. Wait, no. Angry Birds? Yeah, that's all I know. Plants vs. Zombies? Is that on mobile? Probably. I think it was iPad. What's a gacha game? Gotcha. Okay. So like Pokemons? Or like this one where you just sort of collect lots and lots of characters. Pokemons, okay. Monster Super League. Know nothing about it. Oh. Another random encounter.
The aspects of women meant to be the...
To precisely that extent, human rights will be the guiding value in the coming period. And in this respect, I think his assessment is quite accurate. He's also quite accurate in saying that the human rights orientation in American foreign policy, that is the replacement of our long-standing commitment to self-determination by an equally effective commitment to human rights, has been a considerable serious success,
I got to play with
at least in the places where it was intended to be a success, that is, in the United States and in some of the more servile Western European colonies of the United States. However, in other parts of the world, the reaction has been a little more mixed. That is, not everyone is in entire agreement. A good indication, there are many indications. One of them appeared in the Washington Post shortly after his article appeared. There's a front page article in the Post which looks like this. I have it in front of me. There are two articles side by side. One of them is they're headlined U.S. Aid to Nicaragua. And one of them, the top one, is headlined Garbled Rights Message. And the second one is headlined Peasants Expect Little Help. And by looking at them, at their content, pair by pair, you can, line by line, sort of, I won't do it that detailed, you can see just where the human rights
although fawn also works.
Emphasis in foreign policy has been effective and where it has been ineffective. First comes the Garbled Rights Message story, which goes like this. It talks about the situation in Nicaragua, and it says that Nicaragua has become a proving ground where the Carter administration is undergoing a trial and error test of its ability to translate a concern for human rights into an effective instrument of United States foreign policy. But it says that the decisions that have been made concerning Nicaragua seem outwardly confusing and contradictory, so much so that they seem to border on the bizarre, and then describes what happened. First, the administration decided to move ahead with the approval of a military assistance program, whose practical effects would be to strengthen the forces holding the reins of dictatorship in Nicaragua. Then, it turned around and withheld a sizable chunk of non-military aid, whose purpose was to help ease the poverty in Nicaragua. And then comes the following assessment. To diplomats and human rights activists, such decisions are clues to Washington's foreign policy direction. In this instance, though, even the most astute State Department watchers were left bewildered about what had happened. Well, you can make up a theory about what had happened that doesn't seem too difficult to understand, but even though it eluded the most astute political analysts. And the second article that's paired with this describes the people who, lacking the advantages of a higher education and so on, drew an assessment from such events as these.
Done
now
and
let me
done.
turn to the second article, Peasants Expect Little Help. This starts with a long and horrendous description of the kind that you're familiar with if you follow these things at all carefully, about some people who are living in a hideous camp with men suffering from malnutrition and disease and children dying and, all these usual things. And it goes on to describe how 5 months ago the Nicaraguan National Guard evicted them, along with dozens of other peasant families from their seaside
Vigor,
village.
the Stone
Today they live
Heart,
in huts
the
made
lone
of
dwarven
rubbish,
hero of the Knights
in
of the
an empty
Seasons,
railroad
the company
yard.
most
The
difficult
peasants and their
battles is last
sympathizers
to
have
defeat.
protested their treatment to the Nicaraguan
Final
government
struggle against the
and to
great
U.S.
evil.
officials who have expressed an interest in human rights.
I do not.
They
I have
expect
never
no
played a
assistance
Smash
from
Bros.
either.
Game.
And then comes a background information.
I haven't
which
owned a
explains why
Nintendo
they
system
expect
since the
little
Super
assistance.
Nintendo.
The peasants blame their eviction on the desire of Nicaragua's large landholders to acquire still more acreage in which to grow the high-priced long-fiber cotton
Nice methods.
that's the country's
Nice
chief
rules.
export crop. And it goes on to describe how there had been a land reform scheme, but it was abortive and it was reversed, and how soldiers had loaded the peasants on trucks, dumped them in the rail yard, left behind all their possessions, such as they were. They've received no
Well, we did once upon a time.
article, except the menacing
And
nighttime
people do
presence
own
of
Switches
armed
and use and
occasionally prowl the outskirts of their
and
encampments. They have no source of support. Thousands of peasants have been uprooted from their
Twitches.
homes by the National Guard, and it goes on to interview peasants who say that they can't fight what the United States gives the dictatorship and weapons of aid. And it describes how the weapons were used last week to put down a brief revolt led by leftist guerrillas in which 35 people were killed, on and on like that. Then comes the conclusion. In Nicaragua, the U.S. president continues to dominate the politics. American economic aid is a major factor here. The National Guard continues to be supplied, as it has been since it was formed in 1933, with U.S. weapons. Further description of the Nicaraguan.
so it's official with you and the boy toy in Salem.
And finally, the last paragraph. So far, the peasants' campaign has not involved much beyond nighttime from the cars and sing songs they have written to the beat of protest. The songs, like those of 100 such struggles that have come and gone, speak of unity and an end to suffering. Haven't yet reached the level of terror and so on. Well, comparing these accounts, one can see just where and how human rights offenses is very effective American foreign policy analysts and in the press, American press and so on, who can't seem to draw from that garbled rights message any conclusion other than just bewilderment. That is, how could we possibly, given the fact that human rights, how can it be that we're increasing arms aid while reducing the kind of aid that might alleviate poverty? As I say, the peasants seem to have no particular difficulty drawing some conclusions from that conjecture. conjunction of facts. Well, let me come back now to Arthur Schlesinger. As I said, there is a sense in which his comment is quite correct about human rights replacing self-determination as our guiding value. He's correct in another sense.
Is it really ultimate? Is it really the last one they're going to make?
Of sorts,
I think that's just marketing.
Human rights in some country and American policy towards that country. I don't know that the issue has ever been seriously studied, and it's not the kind of question that I would expect American political scientists to study.
Sheik is Zelda's alter ego in one of the Zelda games, right?
Study the relationship between Russian policy in Eastern Europe and the state of human rights in Eastern Europe for the same reason. To my knowledge, there is only one effort to investigate the possible correlation between the human rights situation and U.S. foreign policy. Maybe there are others, but this is the only one I know. Namely, it's one that I was involved in together with Ed Herman, who's an economist at the University of Pennsylvania. And
magically transformed into it. I thought it was just her dressing up and going out and being badass, but I guess.
A number of countries, a dozen or so countries, with which the United States has close relations and in which it has a very heavy influence. Those are obviously the cases through the test. And then we took, for each of those countries, a date at which something significant happened, some significant change took place in the nature of that country. For example, in Brazil, 1964, when the again reformist government was overthrown in a military coup with the and so on. And in the case of Thailand, we also took a point at which the military government would introduce and asked the following question: how did the human rights situation change before and after this event? Studying things such as torture, murders, death squads.
Okay. So the official materials say magically a boy, but I'm guessing other people don't like that, or there's just a weird competing source.
What kind of American aid, relate to these events? And we discovered that in fact American policy are very that is, there's an astonishingly close correlation of the kind that one rarely finds in the social sciences between an increase in human rights violations and an increase in U.S. aid, which is a very close correlation. Now, superficially, one
either way,
well,
transport.
I mean, presumably, apparently, American aid is conditioned by a decline in the human rights situation. That is, if a country wants to get foreign aid, what they ought to do is start sending out death squads to murder peasants and carry out torture and so on and so forth. At least that's what the rough correlation would state. However, as you know, the social scientists among you are very well aware, one has to be very cautious about correlations. It could just be that each of these things is correlated with some third thing. And in fact, that's the case here.
Was she okay with Empa turning her into a boy? Or did he do it to protect her?
Climate change with these events. And it turned out that the investment climate changed favorably.
I did not know that. Did she do it to protect her?
As the human rights situation deteriorated, and also that American aid increased, American support diplomatic increased as the investment climate improved. In fact, what we really ought to conclude, I suppose, is that the United States really has no policy with regard to human rights. That is, human rights in itself.
No, I mean, obviously she did it to protect her. But did she do it with
in the policy of any other state? I don't think that's
Zelda's consent? That's the big thing.
The silly rhetoric that's produced is actually believed by people. But as far as the government and its policies are concerned, human rights is no more an issue than it is in any other country. But there are factors that do relate to American foreign policy. For example, improvements of the investment climate.
Sheik, Tetra.
There's lots of factors entering into that. And that is surely a very significant factor in how American foreign policy is designed.
So Zelda is at least gender fluid.
Throw open their society, their resources, their land, and so on, in fact, their workforce, to the intervention of U.S.-based corporations. No doubt American foreign policy is strongly conditioned by that factor. And in fact, improvement of the investment climate is itself correlated with the deterioration of the climate with regard to human rights, and for very obvious reasons. I mean, if you want to turn, say, the Dominican Republic into as described as an economic miracle, a paradise for investors, and so on and so forth, then one of the things you have to do is make sure you do break up peasant unions and destroy labor unions and get rid of annoying leftists and so on and so forth. And the best way to do that that's ever been discovered is by introducing a murderous
do you watch Riley Dennis's channel at all? She has done a couple of things. Where she runs through like lots and lots of characters. Yes. Where she runs through lots and lots of characters in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Or no, it was a Mario Party thing. Where she goes through and talks about how they're all bi and bi and trans and basically all the different letters and how she interprets each one. It is adorable. She's got massive stories for each one. Yes, that's the one. I know! If you want to actually manage to surprise her. Did that require nerfing Link's abilities at all? Nerfing her abilities at all? Or could you wear the armor over/under the outfit?
In ancient times, the Guardian was created to protect Ilfarn. If the time has come to dismantle our great instrument, take this blessing of cleansing. May it burn away the darkness in your travels.
No, I always remember.
The third part of the ritual is feel the power.
Back to the older games, at least. You would have you'd start out in green, and then you switch to blue, and then red. I think.
He knows. But you have learned how to place the power of this ritual between you and him.
There you go. See, those are the ones I've played. Also, the one in between those two that isn't really a Zelda game.
How can I help?
The one for Nintendo where it's a side scroller and it's entirely different. Oh, it's a fun game. It's just not a Zelda game.
Yes.
Everybody, follow me!
So, what's your opinion on how the timeline in Zelda works? As I understand, it got split in two when Zelda sent Link back in time so he could get a chance to be a real boy at some point. To be a child, to have a childhood. Let's put it that way. Apparently, there's like this whole canon surrounding how Zelda sent Link back in time at the end of one of the games. And that split the timeline in two, creating two diverging... something like that. Two diverging storylines for the Zelda series. Something like that, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Follow me.
Everybody, follow me! How can I help?
Yes?
I never said it was a good or necessary explanation. Remember, I haven't played any Zelda game since Link's Awakening. Oh, there it is. One where Link never existed. Damn. So I'm guessing the one where Link kills Ganon is the timeline that proceeds forward from Ocarina of Time. Does it? That's unfortunate. One thing I can do is close that. Let's see if that does something. It says that the stream is healthy, but the fuck do I know? And it actually looks good from my end. I have no idea. I don't know shit. Yeah, it's that shoddy Pacific Northeastern internet you got. Pacific Northwestern internet. Not my shoddy Southeastern internet. It's probably because you're playing Magic Super Fighty Boy game. That's what it is. Your cell phone is interfering with YouTube. That's a thing that can happen, right? Right. Super Magic Fighty Boy should totally be a game. No, Super Magic Flighty Boy. A game where a pretty boy just flies around.
The dust upon the floor stirs beneath your feet. What brings one of flesh and blood to this empire of spirits? Has the Guardian returned, then? I heard the whispers, but I did not believe. His echoes are strong in this place. Perhaps I do. Ages pass and names change. I have existed longer as a spirit than as a breathing, blooded elf. The Guardian was once a man, a hero of Ilfan in days long gone. He saw more clearly than most. He saw the threats that might destroy all we had built, and he sacrificed everything that our empire might live. A creature of magic he became, and an extension of the very weave. Our enemies, the men of Netheril, feared to face him, so they turned their eyes to weaker prey. by the Guardian The weave is the source of magic, that which fuels the art. It is the heart-blood of mages and... We thought the weave eternal, an endless font of life from which the Guardian might draw. In this, we were wrong. The weave failed, and the Guardian faced a choice. Allow himself to die and leave Ilfan undefended, or draw his life from another source. For the sake of his people, the Guardian turned to the weave's dark twin, and thus he became a creature. Yes, though I prefer to remember. I am merely a historian, and my judgments are of little consequence. So our leaders also believed. They devised the ritual, and the statue lies within the stone communion tree, a blending of arboreal and terrestrial. It symbolized the union of Ilfan's dwarven and elven peoples. Opening the tree requires similar unity. 3 elves and 3 dwarves of Ilfan spaced equally around its trunk. Without the spirits of Ilfan dwell here. Elves and dwarves who were bound closely to the Guardian and the man he was in life. If you gather these spirits to you, then the tree shall... No, I am not like them. They are bound here against their wills, but I have chosen to guard these scrolls.
Let's see, Desert Girl and Ninja Girl. Since I have no idea what the abilities and stuff are in the game, I have no idea what bonuses they might give you. Desert Girl is probably tough and good with fire magic. Ninja Girl is probably fast and does more damage? No idea. Nailed it.
It is not so simple. Just as the Guardian has fallen into shadow, so have the... Destroy these undead, and I believe their spirits would reappear. Yes, but there is more. If you intend to bring spirits to the communion tree, you must undo the wards on the walls of these ruins. The ghost lights, which keep the... They are the wards designed to shelter and trap the spirits within these ruins so they cannot spread their taint beyond this place. To your eyes, the ghost lights glow with a blue light, but to the spirits of my people, the touch of the living is enough. When they are touched by one that lives, they will go out. My knowledge is yours. The memories of our empire are painful. At times I wonder if perhaps my memories of Ilfan are a dream. I know not the name of the lands that surround us now, but once, long ago, it was a unified empire. Lands that welcomed humans and dwarves within its borders. Together, these people achieved a strength seldom seen in those times. But as all empires have a beginning,
always happens in fascism.
Must come. Perhaps we erred in seeking to prevent that end. But it is difficult to simply let something one loves die.
I think that's what I'm going to do.
Fighting
I am
to
going,
protect
after
it.
I finish the Neverwinter Nights 2, I am going to play through Zelda. Some Zeldas. And Link is totally going to be a trans girl. That is her thing.
We had enemies, as all empires do. The orc tribes of the north plagued our borders. But our greatest enemies were the humans of Netheril, who took the magics that we had.
Thank you, Oscar Cultus, for that. And let's go ahead and do that. What else can... Well,
shared with them and built an empire of their own. But their empire grew so swiftly and wild. The people of Ilfan had grown slowly and carefully, like a garden, but the humans of Netheril had little patience for such things. As they tasted power, they hungered for more. We meant no harm in sharing our knowledge. We had assumed that it would be used as we used it, carefully. The Netherese were like children, playing with the land.
Let's see, Sidon looks like a cat person. He's wearing a funny hat. Doesn't have sharp teeth, though. He's got slit-eyed pupils. No idea. Shark Boy.
In the skies as if they were toys for their amusement. The art is not meant for such things, but the fall of our empire came not from them. The darkness that came upon us, yes. When the Guardian turned to the Shadow Weave, our empire crumbled. Our trees withered. Our people simply waned. Dwarves set down their tools and stared numbly as their forges. A few of us fled to the outer reaches of Ilvan, where the Guardian's shadow was. Understand this. The Guardian was an embodiment of the Weave with a singular purpose. That purpose was to preserve Ilfan and to destroy. A ritual was devised to create the Guardian. It was meant. Whether anything remained of the man I knew, I cannot. At the time, we did not know. Even now, I have only scraps of truth, gleaned from hapless visitors to this place in the earth. As far as I know, the fault lies with the Netherese mage, Karsus. He tried to take control of the Weave to become the new god of magic. But in failing, he slew the goddess of magic. She was reborn moments later, but in that instant, all magic failed. That was the end for Netheril's floating cities, and it should have been the end for our... Yes, and in so doing he'd understand this. The Guardian was an 3 times we tried to end him, and only on the 3rd attempt did... Yes, we walled him up within the plane of shadows, or rather...
Oh, those bookshelves, and I can only look at 3 of them. Wow, that's a goodly number of scrolls, though. Go kill... Actually, they're ghasts, not zombies. Because it's Japanese for shark? Oh, there you go.
But it is likely the one he is speaking of is the one who became the Guardian.
What a waste! A waste, do you hear? And you can tell Ananias that I said as much. I did not... A waste, I say. Oh, yes. Chose it himself. Ever the patriot he was. Sacrifices must be made for the good of all. Ilfan is a great nation, and preserving it is our responsibility. Well, I say this. Let the weak and the worthless make the sacrifices. That boy had a mind in his bone cage. He might have advanced the study of magic, but instead he threw it all away for love of country.
Fascism.
Gifted? I suppose, for a human. Ah, yes, he was gifted by the hells. A quick mind, a sharp wit. I heard how it ended for him, lying there screaming for near 100 days, with that fool girl at his bedside, as the weave slowly burned away what was left of him, bit by bit. But he got his wish, didn't he? Lost himself and became the... Yes!
What fool girl? Oh, pining away after your shark boy. Who sacrificed himself for Ilfarn. Just any skeleton, but a skeleton blacksmith. Oh, they just keep coming. It's kind of annoying. Oh, that's nice. Back in... I can never remember. For some reason, I keep on thinking he was living in Paris. But he was just visiting Paris that one time, right? There you go. occasionally works in Paris. You do love your subs. Where the devil are you going? Gotta get my flame on. And you should know better than to wander in the middle of a fight, Vera.
There's more.
Okay, at that time breaking the chest was my bad.
Let's see what they're made of!
I think I spy some unsuspecting playmates ahead.
Mistran belt of priestly might.
Yes.
Oh, she's not good. She can't use it. No, I'll hold on to it till later. And I just busted open all 3 of those footlockers. Oh, and almost died.
Take that!
Oh, I'm dazed. So I'm about to die. So let's
I think I can do that.
let's do something
More
about
have
that.
come to block our path.
I can't move. Not a
My tears right, Boddick. Take that! 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 Take that!
Oh dear, he's afraid. Oh, and so is she. And so is she. She's not. She's casting magic.
My tears right, Boddick.
Stop being scared. Anytime.
Illithid, Mind Flayer slave.
Follow me.
Okay, that did it.
You just follow me and stay.
You must pardon me, friend. It was not my custom in life to greet visitors with swarms of undead. I am called Ananias. Oh yes, such is my punishment, to languish here until the gods see fit to set me free. But I suffer it gladly. My crimes saved a nation. I created the Guardian, you see. Yes, me, a silly fat dwarf. I created him, later tried to destroy him, and I would do it all again. I make no apologies. Indeed, the fault is mine, if it makes you feel any better.
Oh dear.
I have been trapped in this foul undeath for more centuries than I dare to count, and I will likely remain here for many more. It's not a pleasant fate, but I would gladly endure my torments 100-fold before I took back the decisions I made. A great man, a patriot. Can you imagine such a sacrifice? He didn't simply give up his life. He offered up his very self for his people. After his corruption, yes, we tried twice to destroy him. Well, I'm told they tried again afterward, but by then, I was dead. First, we sent the Silken Sisters against him. Silly and foolish, those elf girls, but brave too. I warned them not to strike the Guardian. I counseled our leaders to withdraw, to pull all our folk from the Heartland, and to regroup, to make a plan. The sisters were destroyed. Then our leaders turned to me, and I devised the ritual, the very ritual of purification. We failed. The ritual functioned as expected, but there was dissent amongst us. Some of the wizards, old friends of his, refused to strike. They tried to reason with the Guardian instead. As friends, and arrogant ones at that, they believed that their counsel could change him with the power of Ilfarn. How could they expect not to? He had been their friend. Surely he would remember them, listen to them. Their minds understood the power of the ritual, but their hearts did not. Nothing more than could be expected. The Guardian was no longer a man, no matter what his friends believed. We were divided, and the Guardian slew us, drained our lives, everyone. And with us perished the might of Ilfarn.
Good.
The consequences. Thousands of innocent people protected from the wrath of Netheril, an enclave of culture and tolerance preserved against a canvas of hate and war. No, I do not regret the consequences. The Guardians. A man can act for good purpose or for ill, but he cannot predict every consequence. Walk down one street instead of another, and you might do. The Guardian was conceived with noble purpose. I foresaw no evil in his. A great man, a patriot. Can you imagine? Aha, then you seek.
Ring of Improved Evasion. So you get Improved Evasion. Why doesn't it automatically stack these things? Oh, mama, I'm in fear for my life from the long arm of the law. Lawman is putting into my running, and I'm so far from my home. Oh, mama. Yeah. And here we learn how to herd spirits. Bayura, you stay away from there. It's dangerous.
All right.
Who's for a fight? Come on!
God damn it, Bayura. Did you just wander into a cloud kill? Dumb bunny.
He burns. He screams. Someone must stop Guardian. Is it a... That man is gone, they tell me. Gone! If he is gone, then who lays in the temple? Right. For 10 days have I sat vigil with the Guardian,
this is your elfie
as they call
self.
him now. His pain has only worsened.
Jamjar elf girl.
Worsened when Anais promised it would ease.
Know that this one may not even be aware that she is a shade, and that what she sees with her eyes and the one she speaks of, it must be...
Please, if you could only see him, you would understand. The weave fills him. It boils in his every vein, day and night, 10 day after 10 day.
Just call it a week,
Is it
goddammit.
not enough that he must sacrifice his very self? End this, now! If enough of us come together, demand that Aeneas release him from the ritual, end his pain, it isn't too late. You will? It's been so long. Come with you?
Yes.
I got a scythe. King's scythe.
Yes.
Shine on, harvest moon, high up in the sky. I ain't had no one to love me since January, February, June, or July. Springtime ain't no time to stay outdoors and spoon. Wait, no, that's not right. I've got 2 elves and a dwarf is what I have. Okay.
How can I help? All done.
Okay. All right, crew.
For High Cliff.
You run far away, Bunny.
crew.
The stream did? Sure it's not me? And you also have the weird Linux setup or something. Basically, your computer is black magic and lesbianism making the internet happen. Yeah? That's what I recall.
I can smell you, plunderer. I can taste your steel and hear the rustle of the hundreds you've slain, swirling and fading in your wake. Names? You won't find names in this place, plunderer. Only questions. Yes, our guardian. Have you seen past the ramblings of priests, past the sobs and sighs of broken minds, and spied the real? Yes. Think of him, the perfect protector. They stripped him of his name, so he had no pride. They stripped. His purpose was as pure as it was simple, to protect his nation and destroy its enemies. He wasn't. But here's the dirty little secret, the one that the others won't tell you. We struck first.
Fascism.
We never bothered to learn his intentions. Who can say? The blood-drunk elf girl swooped in before we could ask, before we could think. Yes, the Guardian's nature had changed, but what did that mean? What did he want? Revenge? Did he want his life back? Did he simply want to feed? As for me, I don't think his motives had changed at all, nor have they ever. Perhaps, or lacking an Ilfan to defend, he is simply trying to destroy her enemies, wherever he perceives them to be. Or perhaps it is merely the ramblings of a shadow. For my part, I...
Why was there a trap here? There's nothing here that would make me want to go there. Lesbianism always comes back to boxes.
This is too...
Galileo's head was on the block. His crime was looking at the truth. And as the something of our daily fears explode, I try to trace them to my youth. And then you asked about reincarnation.
Take that! Take that!
Let's get them.
Come on, Chandra. Do something useful. I mean, not very useful because you're standing next to a really powerful sorcerer, but still. If nothing else, you can, distract the bad guys for a bit.
Who approaches us, sisters? Does it
Make it leave us, sisters! Of voices we hear!
We were the Silken Sisters, the pride of Olenthodar. Sword and spell we wielded. 6 we were. 6 we were. And now it wants us.
Will it free us?
Yes, a bargain. An end we
Know that I do not believe it possible to destroy these spirits. They are bound to the King of Shadows, and as long as he exists, they shall as well.
Does it know the Guardian? Does it know how the Guardian fell into shadow? We were the sharpened swords, sharpened spells, went into the forest where he was strong, went in 6, came out 1. He spied us in the wood, he fell upon us, left our soul. But that wasn't all, was it, sisters? No, he was angry. He wasn't finished with us, not yet. He scoured us bare, made us shadow. He can work shadow, shape it as he wills. He worked us like clay, like white, hot steel. 6 blades, hammered into 1. Kill him for us. Show him pain. When 6 were joined, some voices were lost. Mouths sealed. The communion tree. Come, sisters, it's hope.
Tried to crash his little airplane. Good night, Jamie. 5 down, 1 to go.
Now, this isn't some Malthusian argument about how we're all going to die because we're overpopulated and our demand on the resources was too high. No, the demand problem was not one of population, but a problem of market speculation. Of course, as I said above, this crisis wasn't entirely a market invention. A little price rise was due to some supply issues, but the market forces exasperated this problem to turn a small fluctuation into a global crisis that starved millions. And I think it's important to look at how that happened. And to see that,
2008
we need to
World
look
Food
at the
Crisis.
idea of the free market. Part 2. Some relevant context on the free market and deregulation. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of history here, and some of you might find that a little bit boring, but I promise you it's important to understanding how something like markets can lead to a situation where so many thousands of people are starved to death across the world. So, let's have a look at the history of the free market. Okay, so the free market, or laissez-faire, is a concept that was originally advocated by Spanish theologians to protect trade across its transatlantic empire from restrictions. Generally, at this time we're talking about state restrictions emanating at this point from the king. But for the sake of time, and also where my knowledge is best, I'm going to focus mostly on the UK and US, so sorry for my Anglophone bias.
Yes?
It is taken up in some form by the early liberal thinkers, notably John Locke, Adam Smith, Jeremy Bentham, and J.S. Mill. Again here, it's articulated in response to levies on trade enacted by kings and later governments, and, to be brief, it argues that trade should be carried out without or with the minimum of government interference. I intend to do videos in the future which will give more detail on this period, the early market thinkers, the horrific working conditions, wars, and oppressive practices that were defended by laissez-faire or free trade in this period of early capitalism. But for now, suffice to say that while there was never any period of unrestricted trade, free trade and similar ideas were used to defend dodgy business practices and appalling working conditions, to prevent the regulation of business, nationalisation and taxation, and as a motivator for policy with varying levels of success up to the Wall Street crash and the Second World War. I acknowledge that this is a huge generalisation, but we're being brief here. With the Wall Street crash, new regulations came on free market capitalism, notably in the US with Roosevelt's New Deal policies. And after the Second World War, in much of Europe and America, it fell briefly out of fashion in favour of capitalist economics in the style of John Maynard Keynes, who advocated for regulation and taxation within a mixed economy, with some parts under state control, and social welfare systems and services to provide a safety net and a better quality of life to the working classes. Markets were regulated, key industries like energy and transport were nationalised, and the wealthy paid tax on their incomes to provide for society. It was certainly not the end of the free market, and many would argue it didn't go far enough. Certainly the New Deal and European Keynesianism did not eradicate poverty or market capitalism, but a certain degree of regulation was put in place to prevent some of the most extreme free market practices, and there was a more general acceptance of market regulation in the political mainstream. However, the free market didn't just go away, and at the same time, the new fundamentalist free trade movement, based on the work of economists such as Friedrich Hayek and later Milton Friedman, not to mention the novels of Ayn Rand, was emerging and would lead to what we now call neoliberalism. This new trend found a political voice in the politics of Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the United States. They advocated a new age of free market policies which involved privatization and deregulation of markets, partially based on the belief taken from Hayek that markets were actually an expression of the will of people, and that these systems, through meritocratic, social Darwinist competition, would select dynamic individuals whose special creativity would create the innovations to move us forward and the jobs of the future. Therefore, they believed that the freer they made the markets, the more dynamic individuals would be produced, and the freer people would be to express their desires through the market system. This is a huge generalization, of course, but we are being quick here. So Thatcher, Reagan and their political contemporaries began slashing regulation left, right and centre to allow their business chums to flourish.
We have cut the growth of new federal regulations nearly in half.
Fuck you, Reagan.
In 1981, there were 23,000 fewer pages in the Federal Register which lists new regulations than there were in 1980.
And boy did they flourish, and they kept demanding more and more regulations lifted, until today.
We are going to be cutting taxes massively. We're trying to get it down to anywhere from 15 to 20%, and it's now 35%, but it's probably more 38% than it is 35, wouldn't you say? That's a big thing. A bigger thing, and that surprised me, is the fact that we're going to be cutting regulation massively. We think we can cut regulations by 75%, maybe more.
Saying, fuck Trump.
Part 3. So what does this have to do with the global food crisis? To look closely at the causes of this crisis, I'm going to borrow heavily from the report Casino of Hunger, How Wall Street Speculators Fueled the Global Food Crisis by Washington-based NGO Food and Water Watch. It's very short and it's available online, so I encourage you all to read it yourselves if you have doubts. Yes. But what I'm saying here is definitely not new, and there are a ton of other sources online that say the same thing, not to mention books. Some are in the sources, but if you're still unsure, I invite you to have a Google and see that this is not an outlying analysis of these events. So one of the things that got deregulated in the orgy of red tape slashing that was the 1980s was something called commodity futures. Commodity futures are basically a trade in the promise of a given product. And a good example of how this works is with food, and that's literally what we're talking about here, so let's have a look at that.
So a farmer has a field, and they think they can grow about £1,000 worth of corn in it, roughly.
Now this amount can vary from year to year, with harvests and weather and so on, so to get the best security on their field, they sell the crop before they plant it. A company gives them an advance on the projected value of the field, let's say £1,000. Although in practice, I'm sure some undervaluing of the product is involved in an attempt by the company to guarantee their profit. They then have that money guaranteed to live on, and the company takes any surplus or loss, but knows it has a guaranteed right to the product. The company now owns the commodity future of the corn from that field. Now this all seems well and good, right? The farmer gets a guaranteed income and the trader gets a guaranteed product. But what happens if this is not the last transaction? What if the person buying it isn't just going to make something with it or sell it to consumers? What if they want to sell the food future itself for a higher price? Well, if just one person does this, not a lot happens. But if lots of holders of these futures try to sell for higher and higher prices, then the price rises. And the more they do it, the more the price rises. The New Deal in the 1930s had brought in some protections to limit the amount of financial speculation that could be done with food, and you can see why. If a famine resulted in a low supply and the value of the products was expected to rise, people may speculate on the food futures, buy these financial derivatives of food to sell at a higher price, and make the effects of the existing problem much worse by just trading ownership of an as yet non-existent food. But in the 1980s, there were so many fancy financial futures being invented, the regulators lost sight of simple things like food futures, and speculation in food was gradually able to increase. As the Food and Water Watch report says, the hands-off regulatory approach blurred the distinction between the physical hedgers, like farmers and flour mills, in the agricultural commodities futures market, and the speculators that dominated the financial
Never
futures
fought a
markets.
battle. Came out feeling Thunderbelly, they call me, the Iron Arm of Dardath. First dwarf over the walls. Ha! The name's on account of my appetite. Here I was, smiting trolls left and right, and my belly's growling. Oh, I'm all right. Always half expected I'd end like this.
Now here's a spirit with some virtues.
I died in the battle, no doubt. The last battle. They say we won. Walled him up in some plane of shadow. But I don't call that a victory. Victory's when I swing high, sure as steel. All the host of Dardath, 1,000 banners, and iron everywhere, shining as far as I could see. And me at the head of it all, beside old above it all, that crystal worm. Gods, but he was big. Where he came from, who can tell? But good thing we had him, too. He fought even tougher than he looked. Managed to distract the Guardian while the wizards... The Guardian did for him, like he did for all of us. We saw him fall. Last I remember, the whole host of Dardath was marching forward. Me and a few others at their head. Then, and one of them, he was just there. Not at first. I think I would have gone with the others. I could feel them, you know. Feel them. It was before the battle. Swore I wouldn't come home till the Guardian was slain. We all said they beat him, those wizards did. They trapped the Guardian. I don't know how I know that. But whatever...
The CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, effectively removed the position limits on large speculators in agricultural markets, and allowed some futures exchanges to become self-regulated or even unregulated. Even while the rules were being weakened and the volume of contracts was growing, the CFTC pulled cops off the regulatory beat. The number of CFTC employees fell by nearly a fifth, from around 550 staff members in 1999 to 458 staff members in 2007, while the volume of contracts traded on CFTC-regulated markets grew fivefold from 1998 to 2007. And here we come to the world food crisis of 2007 and 2008. So, from at least 2006, if not before, a combination of factors was coming together. First, there was a new demand on the market: biofuels.
How can I help?
Bush-era carbon trading policies and a sharp rise in oil prices had increased the interest in producing biofuels, diverting food stocks from feeding people to producing these fuels. But this alone did not produce the trebling of prices we saw in 2008. This upturn in price, however, did interest financial speculators who were already starting to worry about the security of their property investments, which, of course, as we all remember, would eventually fail, resulting in the 2008 global financial crash from which we are, here in the UK at least, still recovering. As the report says, since the housing market began to implode in 2007, investors began to move into the commodity market to diversify their portfolios, motivated especially by moving into a market that was not evaporating in value. These investors were treating commodities as another type of asset, just like investing in stocks, bonds, or real estate. The rise in new investors drove up prices for consumers. So food seemed like a secure commodity with a rising value, and in the absence of regulation, these investors created volatile commodity index funds to trade food and other commodities in the way they previously had with other assets such as property or shares in companies. This created an artificial scarcity as, while the consumer demand for food had not grown beyond expectations, the demand for its financial derivatives, food futures, grew, and with them grew the price. And boy, did it grow. Here's a graph showing the number of contracts created involving futures of corn, soybeans, and wheat from 2005 to 2008. Here's a graph of the world food prices in the period. And here's soybeans, corn, and Chicago wheat specifically. And now here's a graph of world hunger rates from 1969 to 2010. And this hasn't gone away. Here, in a later graph, we see the spikes in 2012, which I referred to earlier. So there you have it. That's my point. Bye! Only joking. So why have I just gone through this process to show how free market systems caused the global food crisis? Well, obviously it was to make a point. So what is it? Part 4. My point. We now stand at a crossroads in our societies. For years, we have been told that free market solutions will make us all more prosperous and that it is the only way to run an economy. But, well, it hasn't worked. The world food crisis is a perfect parable for understanding why unregulated markets are a terrible way to make social decisions or to run human lives, because markets do not care about human lives. Free markets exist under capitalism, and yes, we are talking about capitalism here, and capitalism values profit. Companies and people are expected to compete in the free market under the profit motive. That is, to make as much money as possible. No theorist of the free market disagrees with this. It's not an unintended outcome. It is proposed as a value to exist under capitalism. In the 2008 World Food Crisis, we see how those profit-driven markets act when given unrestricted access to the physical world. First, we see how it is perfectly possible to take a commodity that is vital to our lives, like food, and rather than manage its distribution to best feed everyone, the market, in fact, prefers to forego feeding people if another use, say biofuel, fetches a higher price. One might think that feeding people is a bigger priority than fueling cars, and grain-based biofuel is not a proper renewable, so I don't think they're saving the planet from climate change by doing this. Reference in the description, but let's not get sidetracked here. But for free market capitalism, that's only true if selling food to the hungry makes you more money. And that's clearly not true, or we wouldn't have more than 10% of people in severe hunger, unable to meet their daily nutritional needs, and over half of the world living on less than $2.50 a day. What's more, this shows that the free market values not just other physical uses for vital commodities, but back and forth inflationary trading between speculators just to enrich themselves more than any humanitarian outcome, like say, not starving millions of people. This increases the value of the commodity, but as long as someone will pay the price for whatever purpose, it's fine. The new value becomes justified in market terms and will likely continue to rise. Of course, this helps neither the hungry seeking food nor the producer of biofuel, as the price inflates for both. Though, of course, I think we can all agree that the biofuel company has less at stake here than the hungry people. So in this case, free market, capitalist relations literally starved people across the third world to death, just to trade back and forth the financial derivatives of the food that could have saved them. This is real, and this is not an isolated incident. In fact, it happens every day, but it's not always as obvious. The global food crisis is a really clear, defined example showing this effect. Markets prioritize profits over people, so you can imagine what happens when these same motives are brought into housing, or healthcare, or education, or employee conditions, especially in the third world. The human good is traded away insofar as it is not compatible with raising the profit of the investment, which it rarely, if ever, is. Our societies have been torn apart by neoliberalism, by the profit motive, by capitalist self-interest, the offshoring of jobs to sweatshop labour, the crushing of union rights and workers' rights, stagnating wages in the UK and increasing insecurity of 0 hours gig economy labour, homelessness, austerity, unemployment and underfunding of schools and privatisation of public health, or refusal to give it in the first place in the US, not to mention the resistance to thinking of serious solutions to climate change, an existential threat to our whole species, because of how it would hurt certain business interests, and even outright denial of the problem in some cases. These are just a few examples of how this profit motive impacts our societies. This leaves us living in a system that promotes and rewards greed and ignores the needs of those that greed takes from. And the greedy are never the ones that suffer. None of the people starved in 2008 could afford to get rich trading those food derivatives. No, the trading was done predominantly by the rich in first world countries, and those who suffered were predominantly the third world poor. As they say, money begets money, and our system only serves to make the rich richer at the expense of the poor. The people who profited from those trades were those who already had plenty, those who needed it least. To be clear, I'm not just trying to tell you a sob story here. I'm trying to highlight an act of systematic violence, an example of how systems we live under can enact indirect violence on huge populations, depriving them of food and cracking down on the subsequent unrest when people object to the system starving them. And this certainly happened in this case too, in places like Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Mozambique, not to mention Pakistan, where the army was deployed to defend fields and warehouses from the hungry, and Egypt, where a young boy was shot by forces suppressing a food riot. This list is by no means exhaustive, and Wikipedia has a list of civil unrest and government action stirred by the 2007 and 2008 food crisis. So here we not only see the economic, systemic violence enacted on these people, but also that this violence is then upheld and backed by direct, state-backed, physical violence when the people dare to question it, as is so often the case in these situations. I said before that we are at a crossroads, and we truly are. I think it seems clear that the problems caused by this uninhibited free market capitalist project have become visible to much of the population. Centrist politicians, after decades of trotting out the same market policies, are becoming less popular and having to fend off political challenges from the left and from the right. But people to the right are demanding that we ignore these problems of the free market and blame our current predicament on lax social values, female dominance, Jewish conspiracies, and immigration stealing your jobs, which is bullshit, by the way. I'll probably do a video on specifically why that's bullshit soon, but I'm just going to say that it's bullshit for now. They propose social constraints, restricted civil liberties, restricted immigration, and stronger institutions of state violence as a solution, often paired with and backed by the same neoliberal economic ideas. But at the same time, there is a growing and increasingly radical left politics which is challenging these notions and wants to reimagine our societies away from these free market capitalist systems and systemic violence. I think this is a hopeful fact. The market cannot save us from itself. To solve these systemic problems, we need to change the systems and the basis on which we design them, to start thinking about solutions not based on the economics of greed and profit, but on that of providing everyone the needs of life, to build a society that provides for all the people, rather than one which takes from the many for the benefit of the few. Otherwise, we will just get more of the same.
And there, in the middle of the tree, a statue.
In ancient times, the Guardian was created to protect Ilfarn. If the time has come to dismantle our great instrument, take this blessing of community.
The fourth part of the ritual is complete. Focus your will upon the statue.
Sparkle. With a rainbow.
Know that though the King of Shadows may wound you countless times, you have the power to undo.
That's nice. Okay, what I'm going to do is, so you know, that, and I think it's that. That is nice.
Suffering, just to further enrich a few powerful people. So when people in the center try to tell you that the free market is the solution to our problems, or when people on the right say the same, or combine it with some argument about threats to the West, or why we should be really afraid of Muslims, or some other nonsense like that, maybe think again and see if there are some voices that are offering alternative ideas, not based on hate and division, or on the same old economics that cause these crises, but on providing for all the people and making a world that is better for everyone.
Okay, so this was my first video, so I'd really appreciate your feedback if you want to leave some in the comments or send me a message. And if you liked it, please like, share and subscribe. I hear that's a thing that people do. And thanks for listening, everyone. Goodbye.
I took the option of not helping them. I've been given the opportunity to talk for possibly of the office, of the supermarket, into our own personal lives and finally into our own heads. We think in terms of buying and selling more and more. And I come across this repeatedly when somebody says to me, I don't buy that idea, and in which I respond, I'm not selling it. And I've used this line over and over again, because it is, to me, the typification of the way in which people deal with idea, deal with culture, deal with the most intimate relationships they have. They invest in a marriage. Who the hell ever invested in a marriage? In a business, perhaps, yes, but not in a marriage. So So people, in a sense, are being hollowed out. It isn't only television that is doing it. Television, as it were, is filling an increasingly empty vessel. That's what's happening. And they're taking over the world of imagination, taking over that world, that dream world, that magnificent dream world that the child still has and which the rest of civilization repeatedly represses in the course of what we call maturation or becoming mature. Television has begun to fill that in with its synthetic plots, with its advertising, with its one-dimensional pictorial image of what reality is all about. This terrifying problem has made us ask the all-important question that most people do when they encounter an analyst today. Not why do I have a twitch, not why do I have a shudder, why is it that I have dreams that wake me up, why do I wake up screaming at night? Those were the questions that you went to in the 1930s if you had a psychological problem and if you went to a therapist. Now they go around and they ask the question, who am I? Who am I? What am I? Why am I? And the key thing that is involved here is what they're asking is, what is their place in the world? Because there is no place in the world for people to be human again. There is no place in the world for people to be personal and to have a personality. And for that reason, we go madly and insanely after all kinds of fashions today to decorate what is a very deep sense of hollowness inside us. We cover ourselves up. We cover ourselves up with different hairdos. We cover ourselves up with different styles of clothing. We cover ourselves up with all kinds of accoutrements. We have to wear Thunderbirds to play Indian. Or we have to wear leather jackets to be tough, even though we may be accountants somewhere. Or we have to dress like prostitutes so we look interesting, even though we may be secretaries somewhere. All of this, we wear boots in the summertime. Who the hell ever wore boots in the summertime? But all of this is meant to make us interesting to ourselves because we are so hollowed out by the breakdown of community.
I disagree with this guy.
By the mutual networks of support systems, by the rich articulation of a spontaneous cultural life that comes out of the streets and that comes from the intercourse of past as well as present and hopefully future, through the different generational interactions that exist. And we are faced with the real problem not only of whether or not we have power anymore over our lives, but who are we and why are we alive? And that becomes the great therapeutic problem in psychiatry today. This points to a very deep sense of disempowerment, as I said, that emerges from the large corporations, that emerges from the invasion, the enormous concentration of the state, and that emerges very significantly from the marketplace into every recess into which we could retreat 30, 40, 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago. The counterculture was an attempt in the 1960s to recreate again a community in which we could retreat. A network in which we could again develop a sense of identity, a sense of solidarity, a sense of community that has been eroded steadily, not only by television, but by the marketplace, by the buyer-seller relationship, by the reduction of everything to an object, to a thing, to an investment that you either buy, that you sell, feedback, input, output. And that's the problem we face. The title Forms of Freedom does not fully convey what could possibly be the point of departure for a solution. You can have a lot of free forms that can become ultimately very totalitarian. Let's not kid ourselves. Or they can become very parochial. If we started up town meetings, for argument's sake, and what could be more intimate, what could be more communal than a town meeting of the kind that is usually idealized in New England? After all, that was the town meeting that gave us the nuclear freeze issue, 180 Vermont towns, along with several Massachusetts town meetings. We would still have the question again, not only of the forms, but what would be the content. These very same town meetings can go very reactionary as well as progressive. So in talking about the forms of freedom, I want to make one thing very plain. I'm also talking about what these forms will be filled in with. Without the freedom that has forms, you're not going to have freedom. If you don't have the container of glass of water, then the water will lie all over the table and finally spill to the ground and ultimately evaporate. You must have the container, the forms. But what you put in those forms can be very toxic or they can be very liberatory. So when I talk about forms of freedom, I always make that reservation: what are we going to put in the way of these forms? What are we going to fill these forms with? And what kind of people are going to be, as it were, catalyzed by these forms into rich personalities? What kind of communities will create these networks of support that will underpin personality and give us the feeling of strength that we are standing on a basis from which to project ourselves as individuals, culturally, sexually, in terms of gender, ethnically, in all our different facets of life and the different roles that we play. Now, briefly, we have had a very rich history of free forms. We have in fact had a very rich history that I would call libertarian, not in the sense of the Libertarian Party or the right-wing libertarians. That is a word that has been stolen. The people on the right who call themselves libertarians are proprietarians. Their main concern is to own property as the basis for freedom. They're not interested in freedom, they're interested in what they call liberty. Liberty means the right to turn land into real estate. Liberty means the right to own a redwood forest and cut it down if you want to. Liberty means, and there's nothing wrong with liberty in a more expanded sense, but it is so tied to property that it means literally owning the community. That is not what I mean by the word libertarian. In fact, the word libertarian was invented literally by Élisée Reclus in the 1890s when the word anarchist became illegal in France because of terrorist activities. Élisée Reclus, who was a very close friend of the Russian anarchist Michael Bakunin, and it's just worth mentioning this in passing, had to invent a word for anarchist because if you called yourself an anarchist, the flicks would immediately pick you up and throw you into jail. You couldn't call your periodical anarchist. You couldn't call yourself anarchist. You couldn't use the word in any... You couldn't call your periodical anarchist. You couldn't call yourself anarchist. You couldn't use the word in anything but a pejorative sense. So he invented the word libertarian. And it's since been expropriated, or appropriated if you like, by the right wing. We have to reclaim that word again because it has a much richer history and a much richer meaning. So when I use that word from here on in, please bear in mind the sense in which I am using it. Now, getting back to what I wanted to say, we have to reconsider the whole question of this. How are we going to create not only the forms of empowerment or forms of freedom, how also are we going to recover the libertarian tradition, the underside of history, as Elise Goulding put it in a magnificent book on feminism and the hidden history of women. The underside of history that has always existed in all movements and in all struggles, and bring that to the surface again so that people can recognize their own traditions which have been buried under or snowed under the razzle-dazzle of the academy, that have been snowed under the razzle-dazzle of official history and even of socialist history, where they're more concerned with talking about the fight between parties than they are between the people and their rulers. And one has only to consult most socialist histories in order to find out what they're really talking about are not the people. They're talking about socialist versus non-socialist, anarchist versus non-anarchist, capitalist versus democratic parties. That's what they argue about. How are we going to recover that libertarian dimension? And not only that libertarian dimension and tradition, with the forms that people spontaneously created in great moments of social change, of radical change. How are we going to recover that? What are we going to learn from it? What were the forms that they created? How do they apply to our own times? I will not go back 2,500 years ago. I could even go back to the tribal world and say that there the real libertarian history of humanity is to be located. Among the Iroquois Confederation, among various sororial groups that women
You
form
have
in
returned a
so-called
measure
primitive
of peace to this
societies.
place.
And there's a
My
marvelous
fellow
work on
spirits
that
were
by
in
the way, the women
torment,
of the
and their
forest,
pain felt
which is
should you
very
defeat the
compelling,
Guardian.
and is
I
forced
believe
into
that
the
peace
format
will
of male
settle over this
history
place
and
at
male
last.
anthropology, while all the data
They
contradicts
are the
the
last. Many came to this place in search.
form their
Here,
own society
take these
apart
tomes.
from men living in the
I
men's
had
house.
nearly complete. They are as
Yolanda
much of my
Murphy wrote
memory
it,
as
but
I can
unfortunately
strive.
her husband was there too. So it begins to be placed within the format of academic anthropology. I could go into that in great detail, and I have a great deal to do with the Akwesasne people, the so-called Iroquois Confederacy, okay? I could go into Greece, which was wrong in a million ways. Patriarchy, slavery, and war. Agonistic mentalities, competitive outlooks. But one thing at least created certain forms, one grandiose town meeting, so to speak, in Athens around 450 BC, from which we can learn, not on which we will model ourselves. There is nothing on
The
which we
final
can model
statue
ourselves.
of purification lies
I
past
could go
the
into
portal.
the medieval commune, which did not mean communism. It really did mean town or city council, and give you endless examples of that. I'm doing a book right now for the Sierra Club, which rolls that whole carpet out, particularly with reference to municipal life. The early towns, even as early as Sumeria, were built around face-to-face democracies, which later turned into hierarchical state-type structures. I could do that. I don't want to burden you with that, because it will take hours to talk about. I could talk about the magnificent revolutionary sections in Paris in 1793 to 1794. And here I just have to pause because it's so breathtakingly fascinating. They took the city of Paris with 1 million people, which is the equivalent of Los Angeles with 20 million people. Given the communication system that they had, you couldn't go any faster than a horse. They had no telephones, they had no telegraph. The only way you could communicate was by letter, and as fast as a letter could be carried, or as fast as you could walk. And within that city of approximately, give or take, 1 million people, they divided the city of Paris during the height of the Great French Revolution in 1793 into 1794 into 48 sections. But these 48 sections, conceived of as neighborhoods, met in direct assemblies, each one of them, 48 assemblies called sections, occupying churches, occupying schools, occupying monasteries, where the citizenry assembled and in a face-to-face relationship discussed all the political affairs of the revolution, including matters of war and peace. And then on top of that established citizens' commissions, and none of them were paid, meeting in these assemblies to feed Paris. So they went out into the countryside and brought food in. This is the spontaneous movement of the people, not the National Convention or National Assembly, about which we hear so much history, the figures of Robespierre, Danton, Saint-Just, and so on and so forth. These were the people of the streets of Paris, the sans-culottes, those who did not have knee breeches but wore long trousers. That's what the word essentially meant, without culottes or breeches.
All right,
With
that's
their
it for
red
tonight.
liberty caps, organizing their own militias, organizing their own revolutionary courts,